Sign over your savings. You're useless now. Those were the exact words that came out of my daughter-in-law. Jessica's mouth that cold December afternoon as she shoved a stack of legal papers in my face like I was a cornered animal. I was sitting in my own armchair in my own living room in the house I had bought with my own sweat 25 years ago. And this woman was yelling at me like I was a disobedient child. Sign it or leave with nothing, she continued, yelling, her eyes bloodshot with rage and her voice trembling with barely concealed greed. But as I held those documents, she wanted me to sign transferring all my assets, all my savings, all my financial security into her name. I couldn't help but feel a small smile tug at the corner of my mouth, because Jessica had no idea that hidden deep inside my brown leather bag was the document that would change everything. A piece of paper that proved that every penny, every piece of property, every investment I had accumulated over 40 years of hard work was already protected in a place she could never, ever touch. For 4 long years, I allowed this woman to treat me like a useless, confused old woman. For 4 years, I swallowed the humiliations, the manipulations, the insults disguised as concern. For 4 years. I watched my own son become a puppet in her hands, losing his personality, his dignity, his ability to think for himself. But that freezing December day, when Jessica finally showed her true colors, when she revealed exactly who she really was beneath that veneer of caring and concerned daughter-in-law, was the day she lost the game forever. The look on her face when I revealed the truth, when she realized she had been completely deceived, that all her carefully laid plans had crumbled in a matter of seconds, was something I will carry with me for the rest of my life. You will be absolutely shocked when you learn exactly what this woman tried to do to me, how she systematically manipulated my family for years, and how I managed to completely turn the tables on her. What happened after this confrontation not only changed my life forever, but completely destroyed her plans to steal everything I had built over a lifetime of work and sacrifice. If you've made it this far, you probably recognize that not all family relationships are as we imagine, right? Maybe you're listening to this story because you've been through something similar, or maybe you're just looking for a moment of reflection and quality entertainment. Either way, you're in the right place. This channel was created for people like us who know that real life sometimes surpasses any fiction. Here in this safe space, real stories like mine are told without judgment, stories that will deeply move you, make you reflect on your own family experiences, and perhaps even help you recognize similar situations in your own life. These are authentic accounts with all the complexity and emotion that only life can offer, where every word is true and every feeling is real. Subscribe to the channel and come be part of this community that understands, supports, and grows together, where every story matters and where you're always welcome, no matter your family background. Now, let me tell you exactly how this whole situation began, every painful detail and every moment of discovery that led me to that final confrontation. My name is Margaret Elizabeth Thompson, and for 72 years I have lived with the firm belief that family is sacred, that unconditional love between relatives is the foundation of a life well lived, and that a good mother-in-law, a true mother-in-law, should always unconditionally support her children and their marital choices, even when those choices seem unwise. For decades, I built what I considered a respectable and prosperous life as the owner and operator of a small but successful chain of 3 boutique coffee shops in Portland, Oregon, a city I chose to call home when I moved from the Midwest at 22, young, ambitious, and determined to build something of my own. I worked hard from the age of 20, waking up every day at 5 in the morning to open the first coffee shop, staying late to close the last, religiously saving every dollar I could, refusing unnecessary luxuries, investing with a cautious wisdom my mother taught me, and by the age of 68, I had managed to amass a fortune that I considered substantial. For a woman who started with absolutely nothing, 3 prime commercial properties in upscale Portland neighborhoods, a restored Victorian home valued at $520,000 in the historic Hawthorne neighborhood, a savings account with $340,000, That grew steadily with compound interest. A diversified portfolio of conservative investments worth $280,000, and the coffee business that generated a monthly net income of $8,000 total. A personal fortune of approximately $1,300,000 amassed through 4 decades of sweat, tears, personal sacrifice, and smart financial decisions. When my son Daniel Robert Thompson, my only child, the light of my life, introduced me to Jessica Marie Collins in October 2019. During a Sunday dinner that had become our weekly tradition, I was genuinely excited and hopeful. She was a seemingly sophisticated and educated 20-year-old woman, a digital marketing graduate from Portland State University, seemingly ambitious and determined to make something of herself, and most importantly, she seemed genuinely caring and attentive to my Daniel. She had carefully styled blonde hair, blue eyes that seemed sincere when she spoke, and a smile that lit up her entire face when she looked at my son. Daniel was absolutely radiant at that first dinner, happier than I'd seen him in years, and I thought, with relief and gratitude, that finally, he'd found someone special, someone who could complete his life, and perhaps give me the grandchildren I dreamed of. Meeting before I left this world. Throughout our courtship, which lasted almost a full year, Jessica was consistently attentive to me, always complimenting me in ways that seemed genuine and spontaneous, saying things like, "Margaret, you're such an inspiring woman. I so admire everything you've accomplished on your own. You're exactly the kind of woman I hope to be when I'm your age," she asked detailed questions about my business, showed genuine and enthusiastic interest in my stories about the difficult early years of building the coffee shops, listened attentively when I shared the challenges of being a female entrepreneur in the 1980s and 1990s, and I felt genuinely welcomed and valued by her. Jessica seemed to understand and appreciate the value of hard work, frequently commenting on how much she admired my work ethic and determination. She even suggested several times that I should write a book about my experiences as an entrepreneur, saying my story could inspire other women. When they married in September 2020 in an intimate but elegant ceremony at the Portland Botanical Gardens, limited to 30 people due to pandemic restrictions, I was absolutely thrilled and proud. The ceremony cost $18,000, a sum I paid in full as a wedding gift to them, plus an additional $25,000 for their honeymoon in Maui and to help with the down payment on their first home. Jessica held me close, crying tears that felt genuine on that sunny September day, whispering in my ear through her sobs that I was exactly the mother-in-law she'd always dreamed of having, that she felt blessed to have me as a second mother. How completely wrong I was, how blind I was to what was really going on. The first subtle signs of change began to appear about 3 months after the wedding, changes so small and gradual that I initially attributed them to the natural stress of two newlyweds adjusting to married life. Jessica began making seemingly innocent and well-meaning comments about how wonderful it would be if she and Daniel could live closer to me, maybe even on the same street, so they could better care for me as I grew older. She always said this with that sweet smile I had come to associate with her caring personality, as if she were genuinely concerned for my well-being and safety. It wasn't long before she began gently suggesting that I was getting older, that perhaps it was time to seriously consider selling one or two of my commercial properties for a quieter, less stressful life. "You've worked so hard all your life, Margaret," she'd say in a soft, concerned voice. "Maybe it's time to enjoy the fruits of your labor, to have more time to relax and enjoy life, to not worry so much about business responsibilities." She always said these things with a caring, protective tone, as if she were genuinely concerned about my health and happiness, as if she wanted only the best for me. When I showed any resistance or hesitation about her suggestions, she would quickly change the subject with a smile and say they were just random thoughts, that she just wanted me to enjoy life more. In March 2021, approximately 6 months after their wedding, they began experiencing what Jessica described as temporary but significant financial difficulties. Jessica had lost her job at the marketing agency where she worked, reportedly due to pandemic-related budget cuts, and Daniel, who worked as a regional sales manager for a medical equipment company, had his salary cut by 30% due to the economic hardships his company was facing. They came to my house on a rainy March afternoon, both looking genuinely stressed and worried, and explained their financial situation to me in details that seemed honest and transparent. "We need temporary help, Margaret," Jessica said tearfully, "just until I can get a new job. And Daniel's salary returns to normal. We hate to ask this, but we have no one else to turn to. As any mother would do, as any decent person would when faced with a family in need." I didn't hesitate for a second to help. I started by paying their mortgage for 3 consecutive months, $2,400 a month, coming directly from my savings account. Then came the credit card bills that had accumulated a total of $5,300, which I paid without question. Then their car needed expensive engine repairs, another $3,200, which I covered immediately when Daniel called me desperately to say he needed the car for work. But Jessica always seemed to have another emergency, always another urgent bill that needed paying. When I paid one expense, she would invariably show up the following week with another desperate situation that required my financial help, always with that loving and grateful tone of voice calling me Mom, Margaret, in a sweet voice, repeatedly telling me how generous and wonderful I was, how they would never forget my kindness, and how they would return every penny as soon as the situation improved. Throughout 2021, I spent approximately $42,000 helping them with what Jessica always described as temporary financial emergencies. Unexpected medical bills, home repairs, tax issues, expenses related to Jessica's job search, always something urgent that simply couldn't wait and required my immediate assistance. What I didn't realize at the time, what completely escaped me because I was focused on being a helpful and generous mother-in-law, was how meticulously Jessica documented every financial transfer, every payment, every monetary gift I made to them. She always insisted, in a way that seemed extremely responsible and organized, that all transfers be made by email or through the bank so that everything was properly recorded and documented. Jessica always explained this insistence by saying that it was so she could pay me back one day when their financial situation improved and stabilized, and that she wanted to have an accurate record of how much she owed me so she could repay me with interest. She said this with such sincerity and apparent responsibility that I was impressed by her sense of financial integrity. I thought it was wonderful that she was so careful and conscientious about family debt. Jessica also began suggesting that it would be prudent for me to have help managing my finances, not because I wasn't capable, she always emphasized, but because people my age deserved less worry and more support. She offered her services to help with paperwork, document organization, and even accompany me to my doctor's appointments to ensure I was receiving the best possible care. In retrospect, it's obvious that she was systematically building a case to question my mental and financial competence, creating a paper trail that could later be used as evidence that I needed supervision and legal guardianship. In 2022, Jessica's suggestions became more frequent and more specific. She began bringing colorful brochures from senior living communities, always emphasizing how safe, convenient, and social they were. "Margaret, look at this beautiful place," she'd say, spreading glossy photos on my coffee table. "You'd have so much company here, so many activities, and you wouldn't have to worry about home maintenance or security." When I showed any resistance to the idea of moving out of my house, Jessica became visibly hurt and frustrated. She said she only wanted the best for me, that she was worried about my safety living alone in such a large house that she thought I deserved an easier, less stressful life. "You've worked so hard your whole life," she repeated, like a mantra. "You deserve to rest now." It was during this time that Jessica began gently introducing the issue of power of attorney. She brought pre-printed forms during our family visits, carefully highlighting the important sections with yellow highlighter, patiently explaining that it was merely a clever legal formality for my own protection. "Margaret, if something were to happen to you, God forbid," she would say in a worried voice, "it would be much easier for Daniel too. Manage your affairs if he had proper legal authorization." The pressure was constant, but always disguised as genuine affection and family concern. Jessica never yelled or made direct demands. Instead, she used subtle emotional manipulation, making me feel guilty for not wanting to accept help, for being stubborn about my independence, for not trusting the family who only wanted to take care of me. During this same period, I began to notice worrying changes in my son Daniel's behavior. He was becoming more distant and less communicative with me, something that completely contradicted his naturally open and caring personality. When I tried to talk to him alone during our family visits, Jessica would invariably appear and completely dominate the conversation, answering for him, making decisions for him, interpreting his words and feelings. I watched my son, who had once been an independent and confident man, gradually transform into a shadow of his former self. He seemed constantly eager to please Jessica, checking in with her before answering even simple questions about his work or interests. It was as if he had lost his ability to have his own opinions or make independent decisions. When I tried to address this change with Daniel directly, he denied that anything was different, saying Jessica was just an attentive wife and that he appreciated having someone who cared so much about him. But I could see in his eyes that something was wrong, that he wasn't happy, even if he couldn't or wouldn't admit it to himself. In September 2022, exactly 2 years after their wedding, Jessica made a proposal that should have completely tipped me off to her true intentions. Over Sunday dinner at my house, she casually suggested that I should consider selling one of my commercial properties to help them purchase a significantly larger and more expensive home. Jessica argued in a way that seemed logical and well thought out, that they needed more space for when they had children, that it would be a smart family investment that would benefit us all in the long run, and that I could consider it an early investment in my future grandchildren's future. The property she had in mind was worth $180,000 in the current market, and she wanted me to sell it to give them $150,000 as a down payment on their new home, which would cost $400,000. When I hesitated and said I'd need to think carefully about such a significant financial decision, Jessica had what I can only describe as her first genuine emotional outburst in my presence. She screamed that I was being selfish and petty, that I was holding on to money I didn't even really need to live comfortably, that I should be thinking about my family's future instead of holding onto assets I no longer actively used. "You have so much money, Margaret," she shouted in a voice I'd never heard come from her mouth before. "You have more than you need to live comfortably for the rest of your life, and here we are struggling to build a future. Why are you being so difficult about this? Don't you want to see your family prosper?" Daniel stood completely paralyzed during this entire outburst, not defending either her or me, just sitting there like a statue while his wife yelled at his mother. In that moment, I finally realized something was deeply wrong with our entire family dynamic, but I still couldn't see the full extent of the manipulation that was happening. Jessica immediately realized she had overreacted and shown too much of her true self. In the days following the confrontation, she returned to her sweet and affectionate self, but even more intensely than before. She showed up at my house with expensive flowers, cried profusely, and apologized profusely for what she described as a moment of emotional weakness. "Margaret, I'm so sorry," she said between sobs that seemed genuine. "I was just so anxious about our future, so worried about how we'll be able to give our future children the life they deserve. Sometimes my anxiety about the future makes me say things in ways that don't truly reflect how I feel. I love you as a mother, and the last thing I want is to hurt you or make you feel pressured." She convinced me through tears and prolonged hugs that I was misreading the situation, that she really did love me unconditionally as a daughter loves a mother, and that I was allowing my own anxiety about aging to make me suspect motivations that simply weren't there. For several weeks after this incident, Jessica was extra attentive and loving to me, bringing me small gifts, calling every day to check on me, and offering to help with anything I needed. She even suggested we take a trip together, just the two of us, so we could strengthen our mother-in-law relationship. In January 2023, I discovered something that completely changed my perspective on the whole situation. By chance, while visiting my longtime friend Dorothy Williams, who worked as a manager at the bank where I held my primary accounts, Dorothy casually mentioned that my daughter-in-law had been there a few weeks earlier, asking very detailed and specific questions about my bank accounts and investments. Dorothy explained that Jessica had introduced herself as my concerned daughter-in-law and had told the bank manager that she was genuinely worried about me, claiming that I was becoming forgetful and confused about money, sometimes repeating the same story several times in the same conversation and occasionally appearing to not remember recent financial transactions. Jessica had requested detailed statements of my accounts, claiming that Daniel was deeply concerned about my mental health and that they wanted a complete understanding of my financial situation so they could adequately protect me from scammers and poor financial decisions that could jeopardize my future financial security. When I confronted Jessica directly about this bank visit, she initially completely denied that anything like this had happened, saying Dorothy must have been confused or thinking about someone else. But when I presented the specific evidence Dorothy had provided, including the exact date and details of the conversation, Jessica changed her story. She admitted she had indeed gone to the bank, but insisted it was only because she was genuinely concerned about me. "Margaret," she said with a shaky voice, "I've noticed you sometimes repeat stories, and I was worried you might be getting a little confused. I just wanted to better understand your situation so I could protect you from people who might try to deceive you." She managed to completely turn the situation around, making it seem like I was being paranoid and suspicious that I was misinterpreting her genuinely caring intentions. She said she was hurt that I was questioning her motives, when she only wanted to protect and care for me like a daughter should care for a mother. It was at that moment that I finally realized I needed legal protection and that the situation was far more serious than I had imagined. I sought out my trusted attorney, Robert Mitchell, a 65 Ireland man who had handled my legal matters for over 15 years and whom I knew to be a man of integrity and experience. I told Robert the entire situation in excruciating detail, including the escalating demands for money, the attempts to convince me to sell properties, the suggestions about moving to a retirement community, the power of attorney forms Jessica constantly brought, and especially her unauthorized visit to the bank to investigate my finances. Robert immediately warned me about the serious risks I was facing. "Margaret," he said with a grave expression I'd never seen on his face before, "what you're describing is a classic pattern of financial manipulation of the elderly. Jessica is clearly building a systematic case to question your mental competency, carefully documenting everything so she can later claim you need legal guardianship." He explained that the emails and bank transfers Jessica had insisted on documenting could be used as evidence that I was being irresponsible with money, making irrational donations, and that I therefore needed a legal guardian to protect my financial interests. The power of attorney forms she constantly offered would give her and Daniel complete legal control over all my financial decisions. Robert suggested a protective strategy that initially seemed drastic and excessive, but later proved to be my literal salvation. He recommended that I immediately create an irrevocable trust, transferring all my assets to this legal structure. I would be the sole beneficiary while alive and mentally competent, but the assets be completely protected from any attempt at manipulation, coercion, or forced transfer. In February 2023, we executed the protection plan in complete secrecy and with care. Robert worked with 2 other attorneys specializing in asset protection to create the Margaret Thompson Family Protection Trust, a sophisticated but impenetrable legal structure that transferred all my assets to absolute legal protection. My 3 commercial properties, my home, all my bank accounts, my investment portfolio, even my coffee shop business, everything was legally transferred to the trust, even if someone could force me to sign documents. Transferring my assets, even if someone could obtain legal power of attorney over me, even if someone could declare me mentally incompetent, those documents would be completely invalid because I was no longer the legal owner of the assets. The trust owned them, and the trust had its own inflexible rules about how the assets could be distributed. I kept only $50,000 in a regular checking account, enough for my regular monthly expenses, and 2. Maintain the appearance that nothing had changed. The rest of my fortune was now shielded by a legal fortress that not even I could break if I wanted to. Robert also prepared additional legal documents that automatically revoked any power of attorney I might be forced to sign under duress or manipulation, and established that only he, as my trusted attorney, could act on my behalf in important legal matters. He even prepared a sealed letter to be delivered to the authorities if anything suspicious happened to me, documenting Jessica's entire history of manipulation and establishing that any allegations of mental incompetence should be thoroughly investigated. During the months following the creation of the trust, Jessica dramatically escalated her campaign of manipulation, as if she could instinctively sense that she was wasting time and opportunities. She began telling mutual friends, distant family members, and even strangers that she was deeply concerned about my mental and cognitive health. Jessica created an elaborate and convincing public narrative that I was suffering from a gerulated mental decline, that I was constantly repeating stories, forgetting the names of people I had known for years, having difficulty managing money and making rational financial decisions, and sometimes even forgetting where I had put important things like keys or documents. She did this in a way that seemed genuinely concerned and caring, always emphasizing how she loved me and wanted to protect my dignity, how she was working hard to get me the professional help I needed, and how difficult it was for her to see someone she loved so much going through this kind of decline. Jessica also began suggesting to people in our extended family and social circle that it might be time to consider some kind of family intervention to help me accept that I needed more support and supervision. She always said these things with tears in her eyes, as if it was painful for her to admit that I was struggling. In May 2023, Jessica convinced Daniel to schedule a doctor's appointment for me, supposedly for a routine checkup that she insisted was important for women my age. She kindly offered to accompany me to the appointment to make sure I didn't forget to mention any important symptoms or concerns. When we arrived at the doctor's office, I discovered it wasn't a general consultation as Jessica had told me. It was actually an appointment with Dr. Harrison Matthews, a geriatrician specializing in dementia and cognitive decline in older adults. Jessica had scheduled the appointment without informing me of the true nature of the appointment, and had provided the doctor with a detailed list of concerning behaviors she claimed to have observed in me over the previous months. The list included allegations that I repeated stories multiple times in the same conversation, that I forgot the names of people close to me, that I had difficulty remembering recent events, that I sometimes seemed confused about dates and times, and that I was making irrational financial decisions, such as giving large sums of money to questionable causes. It was one of the most humiliating experiences of my entire life, sitting in that office while a doctor who had never seen me before asked questions about my memory and mental capacity, basing his questions on false claims Jessica had provided. Made me feel as if my dignity and autonomy were being stripped away piece by piece. Fortunately, Dr. Matthews was an experienced and ethical professional who quickly recognized that I was completely lucid, articulate, and functioning normally in all cognitive aspects. He administered a series of memory, reasoning, and executive function tests, all of which I passed with flying colors. He even commented that I seemed to have exceptional memory and mental clarity for someone my age. Jessica was visibly frustrated and irritated by the positive results of the medical evaluation. When Dr. Matthews explained that I showed no signs of cognitive decline or dementia, that my memory and mental function were completely normal for my age, Jessica argued aggressively with the doctor. She insisted that he hadn't done a proper or a thorough assessment, that I was obviously having a particularly good day, and that he needed to understand that my behavior at home was very different from my behavior in a formal medical setting. Jessica told Dr. Matthews that he wasn't taking her concerns seriously, and that she knew, as someone who spent time with me regularly, that I was definitely having cognitive issues. Dr. Matthews maintained his professional position, explaining that, based on his extensive evaluation, there was no medical evidence of any significant cognitive decline, and that he could not recommend further testing or treatment based solely on subjective concerns without supporting clinical evidence. Jessica left the office visibly angry and frustrated, complaining all the way home that the doctor had been incompetent, that she was going to seek a second opinion from someone more qualified, and that she was not going to allow me to continue without the medical help she knew I needed. It was at this point that Jessica began to abandon her pretense of being a caring and concerned daughter-in-law. She stopped trying to maintain the facade of affection for me and began to more openly demonstrate her frustration and anger over my stubbornness in refusing the help she insisted I needed. Jessica became increasingly cold and calculating in our interactions, always bringing up financial issues, always pointing out how I explored this. I was being irresponsible with my money, always suggesting that I should be more reasonable about planning for the future. She began making comments about how I was wasting money living alone in such a large house, how I should be more considerate of the family's future. She also began to make more direct suggestions about my supposed mental decline even after the positive medical evaluation. Jessica would say things like, "Margaret, you told me that story yesterday. Don't you remember?" Or, "Margaret, you seem confused about what day it is today." She was trying to gaslight me into believing that maybe I really was having cognitive problems. During family gatherings, Jessica began answering questions directed at me as if I wasn't capable of responding for myself. When people asked me about my business or my health, Jessica would jump in and say things like, "Margaret has been having some difficulty remembering details recently, so let me answer that for her." During this entire period, my son Daniel was becoming even more distant and uncomfortable. It was obvious that he was being torn between loyalty to his wife and loyalty to his mother, and that Jessica was putting enormous pressure on him to support her narrative about my supposed incompetence. Daniel Kumoku to avoid having conversations conmigo about anything significant. Quando EU tried to discuss Minha concerns about Jessica's behavior, he would become defensive. Say Q. Jessica was just trying to help Q. I should be grateful per someone who cared. Tanto about me Q. I was being unfair. M. Questioning her motivations. EU could see him, his eyes Q. Something was deeply wrong Q. Oh, wasn't happy. QL was struggling with conflicts QL couldn't or wouldn't discuss with me. But Jessica had managed to isolate him from me so effectively, QL no longer felt Q. Vel could confide me or trust me with his real feelings. Era heartbreaking para watch Mew's son, who had always been such an independent, confident man, become such a shadow to himself, constantly deferring para Jessica's opinions, never expressing his own thoughts or feelings about anything important. In December 2023, almost exactly 4 years after Daniel and Jessica's marriage, Jessica finally decided it was time to make her final move. Daniel had been promoted, and they were planning to buy a much more expensive house that would require a down payment of $200,000. Jessica had decided that this money should come from me. Jessica spent weeks preparing para what she clearly intended para be the final confrontation. EllaConsulted.com, attorney prepared transfer documents. Even went so far as paraforged medical reports alleging QI was suffering from significant cognitive decline. EQ, I needed legal guardianship. Para protect me from my own poor decision making. The documents Q Ella prepared would essentially have given her Daniel complete control over todas my assets, in quanto, leaving me calm apenas uma. Small monthly allowance para basic living expenses. The forged medical reports alleged QI was no longer capable, DE, managing my own financial affairs EQ. I needed immediate intervention, para prevent me from continuing para, make irrational financial decisions. Jessica also prepared UMA detailed financial analysis showing todas as money QI had given Paradem. Over the years presenting it como evidence Q, I was being irresponsible, calm my wealth, needed supervision. Para prevent future poor decisions. Ella had twisted every act to generosity every time Q I had helped them during financial difficulties. Into evidence Q, I was mentally incompetent. On December 15, 2023, a Tuesday afternoon that I will never forget for the rest of my life, Jessica arrived at my house carrying a briefcase full of documents and accompanied not only by Daniel, who looked extremely uncomfortable and anxious, but also by a man she introduced as Tom Bradley, supposedly an attorney, specializing in elder law and family financial planning. Jessica had clearly rehearsed this moment extensively. Ella was dressed professionally, carried herself calm confidence. Spoke with Uma, authority Q I had never seen from her before. Ella explained Q they had come para have Uma's serious family discussion about Minha future about the need proper legal protections para my financial security. Tom Bradley, the supposed attorney, spread documents across Minha coffee table began explaining legal terminology como the proposed arrangement would work. Essentially, todas my assets would be transferred para Trust Q. Jessica Daniel would control me receiving UMA monthly stipend para living expenses, but no longer having direct control over Minha wealth. The documents were sophisticated official looking with multiple pages. Legal language Q was designed para be confusing intimidating. Tom Bradley spoke calm authority about the importance protecting elderly people from their own poor judgment about how this type D arrangement was becoming standard. Practice para families Q cared about their elderly relatives. Cuando I sat down para carefully read through the documents, trying para understand exactly what they were asking me. Para sign. Jessica's patience evaporated completely. Ella had clearly expected Q I would simply trust her sign, whatever Ella put, front de me Minha. Careful examination. D, the documents was not part D her plan. That's cuando Jessica finally showed her true nature completely. Ella began shouting, Q. I was being unnecessarily difficult stubborn Q I was being selfish by hoarding money Q the family needed. Q I should be grateful para have people who cared enough about me para take responsibility para my financial management. You're being ridiculous, Margaret. Ella screamed, her face red calm anger. You don't need all this money. You're just sitting Emmett like dragon guarding treasure. We're trying para help you You're being impossible. When I continued para. Rita traves the documents carefully asking questions about specific clauses. L requesting time para have my own attorney review everything. Jessica completely lost control. Ella began pacing around my living room, gesturing wildly. Shouting about how ungrateful selfish I was being. That's cuando Ella said the words Q. I will never forget the words Q revealed exactly who Ella really was. Sign over your savings, you're useless now. Ella literally shoved the papers, my face, her eyes blazing calm fury, greed. Sign it or leave with nothing. Daniel sat frozen. Throughout this entire outburst, Nao defending either his wife ou his mother, just sitting there like Uma statue while his wife screamed at insulted his mother the most degrading way possible. While Jessica was screaming at me, Daniel was sitting there paralyzed. I maintained my composure completely. I reached into my purse, carefully removed Uma copy DOS trust documents Q Robert had prepared almost a year earlier. Calm Uma.com's steady voice. I said, Jessica dear, I think you don't understand the situation at all. I extended the documents. Para her E explained calmly, Q all. D, my assets had already been protected. M, irrevocable trust. Para almost full year. Even if I wanted Para sign the papers, Ella had brought, even if I was willing, Para. Transfer my wealth, Para her control, the documents would be completely invalid pork. I was no longer the legal owner D anything Ella was trying Para take. The expression Q formed Jessica's face was absolutely indescribable. First confusion, then disbelief, then growing. Comprehension E, finally pure rage as Ella began Para understand Q. Ella had been completely outmaneuvered Q, Aldi her careful planning E. Manipulation had been for nothing. Jessica grabbed the trust documents from my hands. E began reading them, frantically searching Para some loophole. Some way Para reverse OU challenge what had been done. Her hands were shaking as Ella read E. I could see her mind racing as Ella tried Para figure out if there was any way Para get around. The legal protections Q had been put in place. Tom Bradley, the attorney Q Ella, had examined the documents. E confirmed Q. They were legitimate E legally binding. He told Jessica Q the trust had been properly established. EQ any attempt Para challenge, it would be futile. Especially considering Q I was clearly mentally competent at the time. D its creation. E that I remained mentally competent. M the present moment. Jessica exploded. Uma fury. Q was beyond anything I had ever witnessed from another human being. Ella screamed Q. I had conspired against her. Q I had betrayed the family. Q I was Uma, evil old woman who didn't deserve Para have grandchildren. Family love from anyone. You horrible, selfish bitch, Ella screamed, completely abandoning any pretense civility. Oh, respect. You've been planning this against me. You never cared about this family. You never wanted Para help us. You just wanted Para control. Everything. Ella continued screaming about how Ella was going. Para sue me how Ella was going. Para expose. Para everyone what terrible person I was, how Ella was going. Para make sure I died alone. E. Forgotten how Ella would never allow me Para see any grandchildren. Ella E. Daniel might have. The mask had completely fallen away. E. Everyone. M. That room could see exactly who Jessica really was underneath all the manipulation. E. Fake concern. Even Tom Bradley looked shocked. E. Uncomfortable at the complete transformation Q had occurred. M. Her personality. Daniel, who had remained silent throughout Jessica's screaming tirade, finally found his voice. But instead, D defending me from his wife's verbal assault, he began questioning me about why I had hidden the creation day, the trust from them. Why? Hadn't trusted them enough, Para? Tell them about my legal preparations. Margaret, why didn't you tell us about this L? Asked his voice full to confusion. E hurt. Why did you feel Qvoca needed Para hide this from your own family? Don't you trust us? It was painful. Para realized Q, my own son, had been so completely manipulated by Jessica. Q, even M. The face to her obvious greed, E cruelty, he still couldn't see the situation clearly. He still believed QI was somehow the wrong pair, protecting myself from financial exploitation. I explained calmly Para. Daniel about all to Jessica's attempts Para access my bank accounts, about how Ella had lied paramedical professionals, about how Ella had spent years systematically manipulating me financially, E emotionally. I showed him records, D all the transfers Q I had made, totaling more than $65,000 over 4 years, all documented. M. The emails Q Jessica had insisted M keeping. As I laid out all the evidence to Jessica's systematic manipulation, Daniel's expression began Para change. He started Para-see patterns Q. He had been blind Para before behaviors Q. He had rationalized OU, ignored pork. He loved his wife. He trusted her completely. Daniel admitted Q. Jessica had convinced him Q I was becoming senile. EQ. It would be better Para everyone if Ella helped. manage my financial situation. He said Ella had shown him examples day. What Ella claimed were my confused statements, my repeated stories, my poor financial decisions, he had believed her pork. He trusted her judgment about family matters. You mean you've been manipulating Mom all these years? Daniel asked Jessica, his voice growing stronger as he began to understand what had really been happening. You've been lying to me about her mental condition. You've been planning to steal her money, Jessica. Realizing Ella was losing even her husband's support made desperate final. Tempt to maintain control, the situation. Ella claimed everything Ella had done was motivated by love, the family Ella just wanted make sure I would be properly cared my old age. Ella felt betrayed I hadn't trusted her with the truth about my financial planning. But it was too late. Jessica salvaged the situation. Her masks had fallen away completely. Everyone that room had seen exactly who Ella really was underneath all the manipulation, fake concern. Tom Bradley, clearly embarrassed by having been used what was obviously attempted financial fraud, apologized. Parami left the house quickly. Jessica made several more desperate attempts justify her behavior, claiming Ella had been trying protect me from my own poor judgment. Ella had been working ensure my money would be available the family quando it was needed. Ella had never intended actually steal anything from me, but her earlier screaming tirade had revealed her true intentions. Clearly, anyone believe her backtracking attempts. When Ella had screamed about me being useless, demanded I sign over my savings. Ella had shown everyone exactly what her real goals had been all along. Daniel was staring at his wife. Como say he was seeing her the first time. Como say he was finally understanding the woman he had married was completely different from the woman he thought he knew. The realization he had been manipulated used as tool his wife's attempt defraud his own mother was clearly devastating him. The days immediately following the confrontation. I took several important steps. Protect myself. Ensure Jessica could never again attempt what Ella had tried do. First, I changed all the locks in my house. Installed comprehensive security system as Robert had suggested was necessary given Jessica had shown herself capable desperate measures. Second, I completely cut off all contact with Jessica. I made it clear Daniel he was always welcome, my home, my life, but Jessica would never again be permitted any access me, my property. If he wanted maintain relationship with me, it would have to be my terms without Jessica's involvement. Third, I documented everything had happened. Detailed written account I gave Robert a long copies de all. Emails, bank transfers, medical records, other relevant documents. If anything suspicious ever happened, me the future. I wanted their be complete record to Jessica's campaign demanipulation attempted fraud. Robert suggested we also file police report about Jessica's attempted fraud, but I initially decided against it, hoping the humiliation to being exposed would be sufficient. Deter her from any future attempts. In retrospect, this may have been mistake, as it might have prevented her from not attempting similar schemes against other victims. Daniel took several weeks fully process everything had happened. Come terms. With the extent to his wife's deception, initially he tried convince me give Jessica second chance, arguing Ella had just made mistake. Family should forgive each other. But quando I showed him all the evidence Jessica's systematic manipulation, including her unauthorized attempts access, my bank accounts, her lies, paramedical professionals, her forged documents, he finally understood the gravity Do what Ella had attempted Para do. Daniel told me later Q the confrontation had opened his eyes para many other aspects to his marriage. Q he had been ignoring rationalizing. He began para C patterns demanipulation. Control Q Jessica had been using against him as well ways. Q Ella had been isolating him from friends, family controlling his decisions, undermining his confidence, his own judgment. The realization Q he had married a woman who was capable to such systematic deception cruelty was devastating para Daniel. He told me Q he felt like he had been living with stranger Q. Everything he thought he knew about his wife had been carefully constructed facade designed. Para hide her true nature. March 2024. Daniel informed me Q he had decided para divorced Jessica. He said Q he could no longer trust her. He felt disgusted by having been used as tool her attempt para defraud his own mother. The legal proceedings were contentious, with Jessica attempting para claim Q Daniel owed her a portion to the financial gifts Q I had given para the couple during their marriage. Jessica's attorneys tried para argue Q the money I had given para them had been intended as gifts, para the marriage EQ, therefore Jessica was entitled para portion, the divorce settlement. However, the emails Q Jessica herself had insisted keeping where Ella promised para repay me cuando their financial situation improved actually worked against her by proving Q the money had been loans rather than gifts. Durante the divorce proceedings, even more disturbing information about Jessica came para light. Daniel discovered Ella had used credit cards, his name para make personal purchases totaling more than $18,000. Ella had also lied about various professional qualifications, work experiences, her resume, job applications. Most shocking to all was the discovery Q Jessica had done this before. Daniel's attorney found evidence Q Ella had been involved previous relationship with widowed older man another state where Ella had attempted similar strategy, financial manipulation, exploitation. That previous relationship had ended quando the man's adult children discovered Jessica's true intentions. Confronted her about her attempts para gain control their father's assets. The family had threatened legal action. Jessica had disappeared from that man's life, suddenly leaving him heartbroken, confused about what had happened. Jessica was essentially professional con artist who specialized family-based financial fraud. Ella identified vulnerable targets, usually older people with significant financial assets. Used romantic family relationships as tools para gain access para those assets. I had simply been Mark her ongoing criminal enterprise. The discovery to Jessica's patterned behavior made me realize how lucky I had been. Para have Robert's advice, protection. Without the trust Q he had created, I would have been completely vulnerable para. Jessica's scheme Ella might very well have succeeded stealing everything Q I had worked my entire life para build. After learning about Jessica's history, similar fraud attempts, Robert strongly suggested Q I consider taking legal action against her, not just para recover damages, but para protect future potential victims from her schemes. Initially, I hesitated now, wanting para prolong the drama emotional stress, but quando I considered Q other elderly people might fall victim para her predatory behavior. I decided Q it was important para take action. We filed civil lawsuit against Jessica Pora, attempted fraud, emotional distress, elder abuse. The case was strong because we had extensive documentary evidence her manipulation attempts, including the emails where Ella lied about my mental condition, the unauthorized bank inquiries, the forged medical documents. Jessica's attorneys tried paramount defense, claiming Ella had been genuinely concerned about my welfare. All her actions had been motivated by family love rather than greed. However, her recorded statements during the confrontation, particularly her demand QI sign over my savings pork, I was useless, now made it impossible Para sustain this defense. The case was also strengthened by the discovery did Jessica's previous similar behavior with the widowed man, M, the other state. This patterned behavior demonstrated Q. Her actions against me were not isolated mistakes, but part D. UMA's systematic approach, para-financial exploitation. D. Vulnerable older people. M. September 2024 we reached UMA settlement, where Jessica agreed para pay $35,000. M. Damages per emotional distress, E. Elder abuse plus legal fees totaling another $12,000. Ella also had para sign UMA. Comprehensive non-disclosure agreement Q prevented her from speaking publicly about our Tapiza. For ECTHA, we are a questionable ingredients. If you're using, like me, like a scanner app, and if you're using like a scanner app and it's like you're gonna die, like look at this, when we look at this, and we all know Calcen. Allo. Look at this. Family OU attempting any future contact with me, OU Daniel. The settlement also included UMA, provision Q required. Jessica Pora undergo counseling, para-financial exploitation behaviors, E. Para. Report any future romantic relationships, para, her probation. Officer para period D. 3 years. While this wasn't as severe as criminal prosecution might have been, it did provide some protection para future potential victims. Jessica also had para provide UMA, detailed accounting to all the money Q I had given para her. E. Daniel during their marriage totaling $67,400 over 4 years. While Ella was not required para repaid this money, having it officially documented as loans rather than gifts prevented her from claiming any of it as marital assets. M. The divorce proceedings. Looking back at the entire experience, I can see now, Q the warning signs were there from the very beginning. But they were so subtle, E so carefully disguised as normal family interactions. Q, they were easy paramis. Jessica's insistence, M, documenting all financial transfers, her detailed. Questions about my assets, her gradual. Escalation D requests per financial helper. Systematic undermining DAE, my confidence, E independence. All DDs were part D UMA, carefully. Orchestrated plan, para gain control D my wealth. What impresses me most about Jessica's manipulation is how Ella was able para use my own values against me. My desire para buma, good mother-in-law, my willingness para help family members, M, need my respect, para my sons. Marriage Ella twisted all of these positive impulses into weapons. Q. Ella could use para exploit me. The experience taught me several valuable lessons about protecting yourself from financial predators, especially those who use family relationships as tools, para exploitation. First, the importance to having strong legal protections in place before problems develop. If I had waited until Jessica revealed her true intentions, it might have been too late para protect my assets. Second, the critical importance to having trusted advisors outside the family who can provide objective perspective quando you're too emotionally involved para-see situations clearly. Without Robert's guidance, expertise, I might easily have fallen victim para Jessica's sophisticated scheme. Third, the realization Q financial predators often target people through their emotions rather than their logic. Jessica's manipulation worked now because I was financially naive, but because Ella appealed para my emotions, my love, para, my son, my desire, para, be helpful. My fear to being seen as selfish, uncaring. The relationship with my son took considerable time para heal completely. Daniel felt guilty about having been manipulated. About not having defended me, quando Jessica attacked me. He was also dealing with the emotional trauma de his divorce. The realization Q he had wasted for years de his life with Uma woman who had seen him only as Uma tool, para achieving her financial goals. Gradually, as we spent more time together without Jessica's toxic influence, our relationship began Para strengthen again. Daniel started Para. Remember who he was before he met? Jessica, recovering his personality, independence Q, had been systematically undermined during his marriage. Today, almost Deweese, years after the final confrontation, Daniel I have closer relationship than we've had years. He has learned Para value authentic family connections. Para distinguish between genuine love. A manipulative behavior disguised as affection. He has also become much more cautious relationships, having learned Para recognize the warning signs, manipulative behavior. Daniel is now healthy relationship with wonderful woman named Sarah, who demonstrates genuine respect Para. Our family has never made any comments or inquiries about financial matters. Their relationship is based on mutual respect, shared interests, rather than manipulation, control. The experience with Jessica fundamentally changed my perspective on family relationships, trust. While I haven't become cynical, closed off Para new relationships. I have learned Para be more observant, careful about the people I allow into my inner circle. I've established clearer boundaries, maintain greater control over my personal financial information. I've also become more active helping other elderly people protect themselves from similar forms, family-based financial exploitation. I volunteer at Local Senior Center, where we offer workshops, financial protection, legal planning, pair older adults. Many the stories I hear are similar Paramine family members who take advantage the elderly relatives' generosity, trust. The legal protections Q Robert created Paramine assets remain firmly in place continue Para. Give me complete peace de mind. I know Q, I will never again be vulnerable. Para the type demanipulation Q. Jessica attempted that my wealth will be distributed according Para. My wish is quando I'm no longer here Para manage it myself. Today at 74 years old I live fully independent life. I've maintained ownership de all my properties, businesses. I continue Para make all my own decisions about everything important my life. I have healthy, honest relationship with Daniel his new partner. Sarah, Jessica disappeared from our lives completely. After the legal settlement, we heard through mutual acquaintances Qella moved Para another state is involved with new man. Hopefully someone who is better protected against her manipulative tendencies than Daniel was quando he was young, naive. My house, which had been filled with tension anxiety during Jessica's years, demanipulation is once again warm welcoming home. Daniel comes Para dinner every week, often bringing Sarah We have open, honest conversations about everything. There are no more secrets, no more manipulation, just genuine family. It's rebuilding its connections based truth mutual respect. When I look back Para, that terrible day December quando, Jessica screamed at me Para sign over my savings quando. Ella called me useless, demanded Q. I give her everything. I had worked Para build, I feel mixture to sadness, pride. Sadness, Para the time Q was wasted. Para the pain Q was caused. Para our family, Para the innocence Q was lost. Quando we realized Q, someone we trusted, was actually predator. But also pride Para, having had the wisdom Para protect myself. The courage Para seek professional help quando I needed it. The strength Para stand up Para myself. Quando the final confrontation came. The experience taught me Q real strength doesn't come from avoiding conflict, but from facing it honestly quando your dignity security are at stake. Para 4 years I allowed Jessica Para treat me badly because I wanted Para maintain family harmony. But I learned Q, sometimes real peace only comes after you stand up, fight Para your rights, your dignity. Sometimes the loving thing Para do. Para, your family is Para. Protect them from people who would exploit harm them. Today I know Q I am stronger than I ever imagined I could be. I survived sophisticated long-term fraud attempt, protected my life's work, recovered my son rebuilt my life. My own terms. At 74, I feel like I'm beginning Uma new chapter D. My life Uma chapter where no one will ever again try para diminish me. Control me. If you're facing Uma's similar situation, know Q, you are stronger than you think. Trust your instincts, seek professional help, document everything. E, never allow anyone para convince you. EU, you're losing your ability. Para, make your own decisions. Your life experience, wisdom are valuable. You deserve respect, dignity, regardless your age. Family-based financial exploitation is more common than most people want admit, but with proper legal protections, the courage. Face the truth. You can overcome it. Emerge stronger, the other side. It's never too late, take control to your life. Protect what you've spent decades building. That day, cuando Jessica thought Ella had won the game, Ella discovered QI had been several steps ahead DHR all along. Today, as I tell this story, I know Ella lost much more than just access para my money. Ella lost the opportunity para have Uma, real family genuine relationships. That was the greatest victory to all. If you identified with my story, leave a like to help me reach more people who may be going through similar situations. In the comments, tell me if you've been through something similar or if you know someone who needed to hear this message. Subscribe to the channel for more real stories like this, where I share experiences that teach us about strength, family, and overcoming adversity. What part of the story resonated with you the most? Your opinion is very important to me. Share it with someone who needs to know that it's never too late to protect themselves and fight for their dignity. Until the next story,